Hello, everybody. I'm joined here by Jack Harrington. He has
Hello.
an amazing YouTube channel, Blue Collar
Thanks.
Coder, which has helped me in my journey a lot. And one of the things that I really
Good.
liked about your channel is kind of the practical approach of it. And then also, I know in the past, like you like had a very interesting journey of self-development. You also have dyslexia, which has its own challenges. And so like you came from this self-taught approach. And I guess like for people joining in who have maybe never heard of you, which I'll be surprised, but can you tell us about your story, how you got started?
Yeah, sure. So I started coding when I was 13 years old. I was failing in school and all that sort of stuff. But at the time, the microcomputer revolution was starting. And we had things like the TRS-80 Model 1, if you even remember back to that sort of day, or like the original PC, like all that. And some neighbors got some, and I was hanging out at the neighbor's house and doing what kids do. And I started playing with these things and I enjoyed it. And I could start building little games. And that was back in the day when you could actually build a game as just a single person. Well, I guess you could nowadays. I mean, like with the, Stardew Valley guy. But anyway, and it got, I mean, you got kind of hooked on it. And, it was like, this actually works for my weird brain to be able to do this. And so I ended up getting like a job in high school doing Unix work and learning like Fortran and
Wow.
C. And then I kind of went on from there to do some biology work where it was like, doing high-speed data acquisition, did that for a little while in my career, and then moved into web with things like Perl and JavaScript and all that eventually. So I've done everything. I've done like, Windows programming, Mac programming, web programming, the whole gambit. Nowadays I'm teaching full stack dev, React, JS, but really my passion nowadays is for Tanstack. So I'm working with Tanner Lindsley directly on Tanstack, and I'm doing the kind of creator side of the house where building the CLI tool and the web tool to go and like build out Tanstack applications and just having a blast with it.
Yeah.
And that whole all my experience has been just working with people directly on
Yeah.
stuff that they want. And so that's where that practical part of all this comes from. And that's why I call the channel the Blue Collar Coder channel, is because it's like I make stuff for people. I mean, I would read books on compiler design and data structures and algorithms, and I really couldn't understand them unless I related them to things in the real world. Like the idea of just like, binary trees and yada, yada, yada really didn't click for me until I could say, oh, okay, well, you could use it for this kind of thing and help solve this real world problem. And so that's what, like most of the videos that I do are geared around, let's imagine that you're an e-commerce shop and, you want to present your products through, the AI LLM stuff. Well, let's talk about this MCP UI thing, which would allow you to do that, which is just what I did last week.
I was about to say I watched that video and it's like a very interesting concept because that's kind of I was like thinking of evolution of web dev, probably something along those lines where you're going to literally just generate the UI on the fly. And that's kind of
Yeah.
cool and interesting. And I mean, like not to jump around because I wanted to talk a
No,
little bit
jump
about
around.
like the perfect web dev stuff as well. And I think like having, you've been, a full journey from the start of like seeing how computers evolved. And right now, like there's a lot of probably a lot of hype, depending who you talk to about AI. What does that mean for developers? Where's web dev going? And seeing like from your experience of how web evolved and shift, would you say the shift that we're having now in web dev, it kind of follows the same cycle as before? Or do you think that something different is happening this time around because of AI?
I think something very different is happening, honestly. That being said, I do think that we are in for a rude awakening really soon here, because these big frontier models like Claude that everybody's addicted to, Sonnet and, GPT and all that, they are heavily subsidized. So Claude is subsidized, I think, to 300%, which means that if you're paying them $1 for a query, it costs them $3 to run that query. And I don't even know if that includes all the training and everything else that happened behind it. That just may be like the live runtime cost. So at some point, the piper is going to need to be paid. And that means that your $200 a month subscription is going to look more like $600 a month just to cover costs, and then to go and actually get some profit on top of that. And these companies are, they're heavily VC backed, and those VCs are going to want to see profits in the probably trillions. That means that they're going to be charging out the yin yang. And that's the thing. And like at the end of the day, like they need to get us addicted to this stuff so that then when they bump those numbers, we're like, oops, gotta have it. And so I think in a way, like some more traditional skills are going to need to kind of make a comeback. And we're also going to need to start thinking more interesting in a different way about how we use AI, or at least these frontier models, like use them more like product managers, where you're using really good, highly trained 3B models that are a lot cheaper to run to go and do things like make a form or whatever. So you might have a specific model that's trained to make Tanstack forms,
Yeah.
and it can get some instructions, make the form. And then the frontier model is not sitting there blowing through expensive tokens,
Yes.
making, forms.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And
no, I think it's gonna shift dramatically.
And I watched one of your interviews, and I think you had something you said about the most important skill is this ability to debug and troubleshoot, and that some of the
Yeah,
newer developers they're kind of like missing that, and it could be because you have AI at your fingertips, you can just easily ask for the solution, and it's so nice like when you're trying to be productive and move fast. Just take the thing at face value and use it. It's like, hey, my app kind of works. Like, I don't have any trouble, but you're not actually trying to suffer through dealing with errors, like unless like you hit something that LLM falls into this like infinite cycle of doom, as I call it, where it's just not going to help you. You got to just
but yeah,
figure it out on your
yeah, it
own.
has
Like,
no idea. Like
you got
you're using some cutting edge web API that it's never heard of before. It can't even parse through the docs. And got it all. Yes, I've been there, done that. I heard something recently where like, they had like the 7 rules of vibe coding or something like that, and one of them was if it doesn't work, re-roll. And you're like, whoa, okay. I mean, I kind of get it. I mean, I've certainly done that. Well, maybe, I don't know, probably have done that. But yeah, you need to be able to actually figure stuff out. And that's a real skill. I think that's what separates like a junior developer from a senior developer is the ability to just kind of get in there and figure out what does this error mean? When it says, this value is null or undefined, don't just jump onto Discord and say, well, what's this value? It's like, well, it's null or it's undefined, by the way. Like it's telling you, what it is.
Yeah, and I think like with the AI tools, like before, it kind of sneaks up on you, especially if you use it on your day-to-day basis. And like I had an experience where like my internet went out, and I literally for a second like I don't think I know how to code anymore, and that freaked me out. And so now I have like a different way of how I use AI, and I use it from a standpoint
Okay.
of like trying to teach me the things that I don't understand versus like here's the solution, here's how I did it. And one of the things I eliminated, at least for my use case, I don't have AI in my IDE, like my VS Code, it has nothing. So I have to manually type it. I know some people will probably like be like, "Hey, you're wasting time." Like, but to me, I want to recall, like, let me try things and let me fail, and then figure out why, and then I could then in a separate thing. That's why I kind of like Claude in the CLI, just like it's separate. You could just ask it a question, and a lot of times I don't ask like fix this for me. I ask them like having this error, please explain to me what's happening.
And why
Where
was
should
this
I
not
look? Yeah,
working? Like,
why is it
yeah.
happening? And because I find it that it's actually easy. Like if you upload some of this thinking, like out of habit, you're just gonna forget. And I think that's one
Yeah.
of the things that I'm trying to do is to make sure that I use the tools to make me better and maybe automate some of the boring stuff, but at the same time relying on them like fully, I think it partly scares me. And for the fact that you said, people are gonna have a rude awakening because everything is subsidized. And so like I don't want to be the developer when that happens. I'm now like it's like being addicted to like some drug. Like, oh no, I gotta pay like thousands of dollars just so I could keep my job. It's like no, you should probably learn the basics. You should probably understand and develop, continue learning as a developer. And one of the ways that I think about it, it's using AI like productivity versus curiosity. So the idea, it's like sometimes
Mm.
you need to be productive, but if you want to learn, you have to be curious. And AI tools are not going to help you do that. You have to, like you said, that's why I love your channel, because like you're really focusing on building, building, building. I mean, AI, like you could use it properly. Like, let me give that caveat there.
I will tell you, like in the cold stark reality is like if when I'm researching something and I'm building it out, like I'm using AI as I go. I'll show it to you, kind of the finished product or build up to the finished product or something like that. But I guess I think it's implied in a way that like maybe I wrote a lot of this code, maybe I didn't. I don't know. But
Yeah.
I mean, I've always vetted it. Like I know what I'm showing you, and there's definitely times when it'll write for me something and it's not in a style that I. And I've actually
Yeah.
should just make some system rules around that. But I will say I've been doing kind of what you've been doing in terms of like if I don't know, I'm going out to dinner or whatever, right? And I'm like thinking to myself, I'm working on this problem and I've got this thing where I need to like, I don't know, run a full VM inside of on a page or something like that. Like, how am I going to do that? I don't even know. Right. And so I'll fire up Claude on my phone and put it into research mode and be like, what are my options? Right. And it'll go off, whatever, 20 minutes, an hour later, it'd be like, okay, I got a report for you. And it's like, and then you get this, trade-offs and architecture. Oh, wow. I didn't know that existed. And it's been very helpful for that. And that's not direct coding. That's literally just like do a bunch of research for me, figure out what's out there and compare my different options. Cause there's like everything we do has 15 different solutions, like 15 different technologies that will get it done for you.
Yeah, that part of it, I think, doing like the research and kind of helping you parse through a lot of information quickly, I think that is the right use case. And one of the things that I like to do is trying like a bunch of different things. And you could run some of those things in parallel, like get 5, 6 different examples, and then you kind of look at all the different ones. And even if the stuff is broken, you kind of by process of elimination, it's like, well, that didn't work. So let me try something else. And I think like that kind of like I see it like supercharging my learning done properly. But one of the things like I've noticed, because I make some tutorials and someone will literally comment, your tutorial is broken because I tried this thing, it didn't work. And to me, it just says that they didn't take a moment to try to fix it on them, like themselves. They literally like, maybe they copy and pasted something wrong, but they don't understand enough of the code to kind of catch where that is. And I know when I was like learning to code, that's something I experienced. And the only way to solve it is to just suffer through it and figuring out. But I remember like building a project, getting like 50% into it, and then something breaking. And because I didn't understand enough about the code that I was doing, I had no idea what the break was. And so literally start fresh from the beginning because I had no idea. And so now it's like, okay, you have to.
But you learned a lot along the way on that one.
Yes, 100%. You do learn. You do learn.
Have you ever read The Pragmatic Programmer? It's an older
excellent book. Yeah, I recommend it. Recommend it.
One of their things was don't ever ship code you don't understand. And I think we do a lot of that nowadays. A lot of vibe coding, what do they call like security vulnerabilities as a service kind of thing. Yeah.
Speaking of security things, I was doing something with V0, and luckily it was still a development environment, even though it's a development environment that was hosted somewhere on the server. So it could have been a production environment, but it wasn't. And I asked it to make an API call to fetch the data, and it just went into this recursive loop. And so I DDoSed my server. Like, luckily, like I had stuff in place that it stopped and turned off. But I was like, oh, wow. Like it could happen before you even have a chance to stop it. And so that to me, I was like, like, I wonder how many people think about that, like taking these precautions and understanding that,
don't know, because I see a few folks on Twitter who are like, ooh, I'm running 15 instances of Claude simultaneously and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, dude, no, I got to keep my finger on the pulse of one, and I watch that thing like a hawk. And when it starts to spin, like, no, okay. Hold up. I'm going to take a look, stop it, take a look around, see what's going on. What'd you try? All that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And that's kind of like,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, do you use like what's your workflow with working like in Git or with Git when it comes to this kind of? Well, I guess you don't use it in the IDE, so
like because I use it in CLI, I learned that you should save frequently. I didn't implement this flow, but one of the things that I wanted to do, because you could have like tool calls in Claude, so I wanted to create a flow where before I ask it to do something, it just automatically creates a separate branch, does all the changes, and then it'll create a PR, so I could review the changes. That's if I wanted to kind of run it on that automatic mode. But that's probably as far as I would go. The only way I would let it do something automatically if it does it in a separate branch and it's something that I still have to review at the end. Not like, hey, do this, do that. One of the things that's been helping me in Claude is I realized, like, I think of AI, it's just really good at pattern recognition. And so if you start a project and you come up with some like patterns that you like, like I'll either put it in the cloud MD file, or I have
Yeah,
a separate file. And I've been basically like, and it worked really well, is being like, hey, I need to create this like new controller that like does this, blah, 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 use this pattern. And then it literally will, no problem, be able to do that. But if you ask it to do something vaguely, or something that it has to kind of guess what you want, it's going to create a bunch of random stuff. And so to me, one of the things I found out with like the smaller like one shot your prompt is, the more it's just going to make things up that it thinks is best, but it's not
totally.
going to follow like my practices. And so I realize is that there, you do have to put in this effort and create these guardrails of like exactly what you want. And if you do that well, I think it works pretty well.
Yeah, not unless your best practices are like located in the one file that it's actually working on. Because it's not going to take a look within one little session. It's not going to
Right.
look around to see, oh,
No.
okay, you're doing APIs like this, blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
So
So
we did something like this, or I did something like this for Tanstack Start just recently. I needed an experiment. I did an experiment where I just basically took the docs and some of the code examples, and I created a single markdown file that was like, headline, make a route, boom. 10, example, make a route that's parameterized, boom. And I think I called it like Tanstack recipes or something like that. And then I used Evilite to go and basically give GPT, Sonnet, and I think I ran one more. I think I ran like an Olama local one to go and see, given that as a starting point, will you answer my questions correctly using Tanstack Start as opposed to Next.js, which is what you've been probably trained on, or Remix? And it did it. It did it really, really well. But that is exactly what you're talking about. Creating those
yes.
markdown files that are like, hey, if you need to create an API, if you need to create an authenticated API,
Yeah.
or here's an example of that. Here's an example of an on-off API. And it's like, and as you're just kind of building out the app, just keep layering on that Claude
Yes.
file. And the other
Yes.
cool thing is, I've seen something really interesting just lately, is having the AI actually edit those files as well. Like keep stuff in sequence. Like if you've got, I don't know, a README or an architecture.md file that's got like all of your endpoints or whatever, right? Say as part of maybe a commit hook, or I think, what is it? Kiro actually has like other hooks where it's like, if I change the API, then go and make sure that this file gets updated with the
Yes.
new API signature, which is really cool. And it's definitely like the kind of thing is like, those always get out of date,
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think exactly like the way you explain it, I think if that's like your workflow, you're going to have a pleasant experience with AI, because
Yeah.
you're guiding it really strategically into exactly what you want. And I think that's like what it's good at, like taking patterns that exist and then taking what you want and like transcribing it using those same patterns. But like that, one shot, approach is not going to work. And one of the things that I realized, like some of these tools, not saying all of them, but some of them, they're basically really good at making clones, like YouTube clone, Netflix clone. And
Yeah.
I think it's because they literally been trained on that data. And so when you ask it something interesting, it kind of gets lost. Like I'm learning music and I have this thing called like push to, and it like represent notes a different way. And it's like, it's not just knowing how to code that, like, but you have to understand kind of music theory, how note structure work. And when I asked like the AI to build it, it totally just made stuff up because it didn't have enough context and it wasn't able to figuring out like what it needed. And I don't even want to use the word figuring out, because I still think like LLMs, they're just really smart at statistically generating the next thing, but I
Yeah.
don't
That's
think they
exactly what it is.
understand
Yeah.
the concept of like what they're doing. But it fooled everybody, to thinking. And so like for me, I'm kind of at the point like, okay, the more prepared you are and the better documentation you have, the easier you could move fast eventually. It's like I think of it as like TypeScript, like making all your types correct, and then eventually you could move faster in your project. And it's like the same thing. It's just, but it's not magic.
No.
And then what I'm realizing is like, in order to have a good experience, you do have to have this knowledge of development to be able to understand what's a good pattern, or at least be able to look at two different things and say, this doesn't make sense because of A, or this makes, and be able to dictate it. But with that being said, like, I know there's so many people that were excited about web development. And on my YouTube channel, I started seeing people quitting web development because they think AI is going to replace things. And like, or replace developers. Or you see some of these founders, like the guy from NVIDIA is like, you don't need to learn how to code because we'll do it for you. And I think that's just so misguided.
Yeah.
Because like the more I use the AI tools, the more I see where we fit in as developers versus
Hmm.
like where they could be used as tools. So like I was gonna kind of ask like, what is your opinion or thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's extremely short-sighted, and the problem is that you're going to create this void in the experience space of the sum total of developers in the world, where it's like junior developers don't exist much anymore, and that's a real problem because junior developers are the people that become senior developers, and if we don't have junior developers, then yeah, like 10 years from now, like we're gonna suffer 5 to 10 years, probably that kind of time horizon. Yeah, that's not
And
good.
like, and
And,
so
and
like,
no, come on, I mean, come on, Nvidia guy, really?
yeah, they know,
No,
they know.
no,
Yeah.
give me a
They
break.
want, they just want the investments.
Yeah, exactly it. It's selling to the CEOs, CTOs who are like, I could be on my golf course, an hour earlier if I didn't have to talk to some, pencil neck bozo about, an API or whatever. So why not just replace them with an AI? Come on, like seriously, like, you actually need people who know what they're doing, unless it's tic tac toe or a YouTube clone or whatever.
Cody from Web Dev Cody, he's an amazing developer. He has like a
I
lot of
love
experience,
Cody.
and he does amazing content. And he been making a lot of videos on using AI and Claude to move really fast. And he's like, I can't believe this is so amazing. Like soon, like people that are not using Claude, it's like you're going to be left behind because you're not being productive. I think the one thing that he's missing, it's like you are a good developer and you know exactly what you need and you have that context. And that's why to you, it feels like, oh my God, why isn't everybody else doing? But if you didn't have that experience, didn't know how to read code to understand that it's right code or how to give a guidance, it's like you would not be having that same experience. And so to me, I look at it like as, to be a pilot, yeah, plane practically flies itself, but there's still a lot of the core knowledge that you need to do just when it matters. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing. And when you give rational and common sense online, it just doesn't do well. You know what I
Nobody
mean?
likes that.
So you got to be like,
Yeah.
oh no, everything is gone.
Yeah, you gotta make the thumbnail. It's like, are we getting that?
Yeah, because I would
Yeah.
imagine like from just your experience, like of starting out like coding and every transition that you went through, there's always a pivot. And so like I guess like my question would be for developers watching who are somewhat newer, what advice would you give them to continue to make sure that they stay relevant or to motivate them to know that, hey, this is still a viable thing and like field for you?
I think those are two bigly different questions.
I have ADHD, so sorry for that. But I'm like,
Yeah,
let me just
no,
put
no,
it
it's
like
okay.
this.
Yeah.
Throw it on you.
No,
Let's start. Okay.
two very big different questions. So, how to stay relevant? I mean, that, that's the kind of thing that actually my dyslexia helps with, because I forget everything I learned and I just have to relearn it, and so everything seems new to me all the time. All the core fundamentals stay around, but whatever. Anyway, I think it's just what keeps me engaged is really like enjoying the craft, enjoying building things for people, enjoying seeing their reactions when they get what they like, or we come up with something new that nobody's ever seen before. I mean, I think those are the moments that I really live for. I was just talking to a guy today about an experience at Nike where we went off and built this thing that we'd asked the AI folks for 6 months, and they were like, oh, okay, whatever, stall, whatever. And we just went off and built it, and over a weekend got it deployed, and it was amazing, and people loved it, and we made a lot of money, and it was fun. It was exciting, and so yeah, that's one way to stay motivated for sure. But the way to stay up to date, boy, you kind of got to get an eye for industry trends, right? Right now, it's all about AI and MCP, and then you got to kind of watch out for the red herrings like crypto. To me, that I think there's obviously a ton of money there, but I think it's kind of shady. But anyway, I think you just kind of keep a nose out for that sort of stuff. And as I said in this just most recent video, it's like you want to be learning stuff that is going to be hitting like 6 to 12 months out. And so that when you get those meetings where people are like, oh, have you heard about this? You're like, oh yeah, I researched that a while ago, played with it, kept some notes for myself, kept some repos, kept some links, around to the stuff that really helped me. And I'm sure we could make that even better with AI, like keep, like some markdown documents and yada yada. Yeah, that's where that's how you stay ahead of it.
Yeah.
That's certainly helped me over the years, going from language to language to language, and seeing what the job market looks like and all that.
Yeah, that's like, it's very hard to like read the future, but one of the things like a lot of people though, like they see the hype, they hear what people say, and they, without exploring it on their own, they just believe the hype, and they use it to kind of make decisions, which to me is really scary, because it's like you're literally letting other people make decisions for you. And one of the things, like somebody like said, like, hey, like developers going to be replaced with AI soon, you're not going to need this. And I'm like, well, who's going to be still managing that process? Maybe like development will shift, kind of like what we do. Maybe we don't physically write as much code, but we like audit the code,
You
we
shepherd
make
the code.
changes. You
Yeah.
exactly shepherd the code, which still requires you to know what the hell it's doing, right? And it's
Yep.
like you need people for that, and that's the same skill like that you need as a software engineer. The only difference is you're physically not typing on your keyboard as much, but you're still going through the thinking process. You're still thinking about your application, and then like and for me, it's like I'm always trying to kind of like figure out what's a good way to tell people that if you enjoy doing the thing because it brings you like joy and happiness, like that's a good enough reason to continue pursuing it. It's like, because you'll
Yeah.
never be like any job you have, like if you enjoy it, it's going to be nicer. Like we all worked at jobs that we didn't like, but don't let somebody like influencer tell you that AI is going to take all the jobs and you just not try it for yourself. I think that's kind of just a disservice.
Yeah, I gotta wonder, like the people that are just bailing out, was it really for them in the first place?
True. That's,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, because I've met a lot of people in my career, obviously, and there are definitely some folks who are like, you can just tell the jump in folks who like really enjoy like getting into the details and like pulling stuff apart and figuring out how it works and all that kind of thing. And our industry has definitely gotten some folks who are just like, hey, I just want you to tell me how to make this happen. I don't want to solve this for myself. And it's like, that's not, you're not going to be much of an engineer that way.
Yeah.
Right. And you're going to get frustrated a lot because this job is very like, particularly in like the node space, in the JavaScript space, it's kind of Wild West. There are standards for sure, but sometimes like things don't work the way that they're documented, or this browser is different from that browser. And you just got to get in there and like figure it out and make it work. And sometimes that AI is not going to help you with it.
Yeah, and I think that like the point you're making, it's like a self-selecting mechanism to weed out people that are not really serious. And like I hate to say it that way, but like for me, like the reason I broke into this industry, because I switched careers like later in my life into software engineering, is because I did it as a hobby for fun because it's something I enjoyed, and I never thought myself doing it professionally. And then at my other job that I had, I got injured, and I was like, oh man, I actually have to do something else different. I'm like, oh, I like this coding thing. Let me like pursue it. But like I know that if I get laid off or get fired, I'll still code on my free time. And to me, I
Yeah.
think that's a good sign. It's like, hey, I love to tinker. And it's like, hey, maybe this is for you. And I think like if you're that mindset, all that other stuff, like, oh, is AI going to take my job, or how am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? Like it doesn't become of a big concern from the standpoint of like, worrying too much about it, because you already settled on what you want to do.
And I think of coding more like cooking in a way. You can cook at home for yourself, and you learn a certain level of skill. You can cook professionally, and that's a different level of skill again. But coding is just omnipresent nowadays. You're coding inside of spreadsheets. You're coding inside of Word documents or whatever, or you're coding JavaScript or Python or whatever. And you could be coding for doing, I don't know, making some really cool 3D model or whatever, like just for fun. Or you could be coding for, building an e-commerce app and for a company, whatever. But I think just, that digital literacy, like there's a value in just understanding how code works, how systems process stuff. What's a client? What's a server? Where's this actually happening? Where's this being stored? That kind of stuff.
And it's so crazy because like to me that's just so exciting, and I realize I have like a lot of
Yeah.
friends that I just talk about this stuff with them all the time, like outside of work, and it's kind of like, oh, this is because this is what you like. I did wanted to ask, like, you've love React, you've built stuff with Next.js, you built like things with a bunch of other things, but you really started recently doing a lot of stuff with Tanstack. And I wanted to kind of ask, what is the attraction of like Tanstack or Tanstack in your opinion? Why do you really enjoy working with it? And this is something that like I've been transitioning to, and I think Tanner is doing an amazing job. And it's nice to see somebody else outside of just Next.js, walking around.
Tanner and I kind of think in the same sort of direction, very like customer focused. He created a React query to solve a particular problem that React just didn't have primitives for going and fetching data. And as it turns out, we fetch a lot of data. It's single page applications, they're dynamic, we fetch data, so you might as well have a really good hook. And so he went and he built one that really works well in production settings and has the kind of feature set that you'd want. Like, oh, you can put one key on there and it'll go and hit the endpoint on an interval. You can put that kind of thing. Or here's a key where you can go and validate the data coming back or whatever. And it's that kind of practical approach that has suffused like the entire Tanstack ecosystem. You can always kind of track back like every little change that we're making to like, this is going to help this kind of customer do this kind of thing. And on the Discord server, when we're talking about, oh, you know what, why would you need that kind of feature in there? I can come back and say, oh, well, this is like, we need this for MCP, and this is going to allow us to go and do this kind of thing. And then immediately they're like, yeah, okay, we get that. And so I love that practicality element to it. And I also love the ethos that, we're not beholden to VC. We're not looking to go and do any kind of play like that where, we're going to bend the framework so that you have to sit on top of our, networking stack or whatever, not have to, but I mean, that kind of thing, right? Although that is, that's challenging, right? Because I mean, everybody's got to eat. So we're still working through how we're going to make that actually, but I think it's just exciting. It's really exciting. The people who rally around this are amazing to a person. Like I will get on and I'll be like, oh, okay, I want to go and do a video on Tanstack DB, and I'll talk to the creator and I'll just have this fantastic conversation with guy like, oh, what about this? What about this? And kind of like, and it's great. I love those conversations where you're just talking to another, the person who's creating in code, and I'm talking about, creating in content and getting those worlds to meet. And it's just fun. The people are really smart, and I love working with smart people. Yeah. It's like, sometimes you don't get that at work. And so you got to find a place where it's like
community where you do that.
A community where smart people hang out. And Tanner just seems to have, I don't know, like you just sort of like put up like a little radio beacon saying, here's a beacon of sanity in the world. Why don't you come on over and we'll play.
Yeah, it's interesting because like when you talk to a lot of developers and the DX experience, like, everything that Tanner has created, they highly speak about it. And even like some internal projects at our company, they decided not to go with Next, but did like Tanstack like router, Tanstack query. I think Tanstack start wasn't quite ready back then, but like it's just like
not
amazing.
Quite ready yet.
It's getting there, right? It's getting there.
Couple more weeks,
but it's getting there. I'm excited. I'm excited for the launch. I mean, I think it's just amazing to see what you're doing. I think like just in general, like having other frameworks rather than like Next.js. And like, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with Next.js, but I think like having options and seeing how other people do it and giving you the flexibility to pick the right stack for your project. And that's one of the things like a lot of people like, they talk to me and they're like, oh, last week you were talking about Next, like this week you talking about Astro, like now you're talking about Tanstack. It's like, well, right, because every requirement is different. And you don't build a thing with the tool first. Like you build it based on like, what are you trying to build? And then you find the tools that exist in the ecosystem and you pick the right one. Like even like for me, like I don't recommend like Strapi for everybody. It's like, it's just like, you got to pick the right thing for what you're doing.
Right tool for the right job.
And yeah, one thing that I wanted to say, like I really love, I want to explore more what you guys doing with the CLI and how you're building all these easy ways frictionlessly to get integrated with a bunch of different services. Like you want to kind of mention and talk about that a little bit?
Thanks. Get to plug my own tool.
Hey, there you go. Yes.
Yeah. So the React team did something interesting. They decided that they were going to I don't know, prioritize whatever CRA, create React app, which if you are an educator or just somebody starting out with React, create React app, or you're building a spa, create React app is actually really handy. Like it was a great way to bootstrap a React app. And they just said, we're not going to maintain it anymore. Oh, okay. So I talked to Tanner, like I think on a Thursday or Friday or something like that. And I'm like, you know what we should do? We should go and build like create Tanstack app. And he's like, yeah, that's a good idea. And so I went off and I literally just built it. And by like Saturday, I'd built it. Basically it would go and create a Tanstack app that was exactly the same as a CRA app, except for it's on Tanstack. And it happened to have like a router built in. So it's a little bit easier to get started with the router, a couple of little tweaks, but in general, it was the same exact starting point that you get with CRA. And I learned from the team how to go and make it a real, Tanstack library and how to get it published. They've got some really good tooling around that for obvious reasons, because they put out a lot of libraries. And that was like kind of the start of sort of getting into it. I mean, and I became the owner of this thing that almost immediately had thousands of downloads. And it was like, wow, that's kind of cool. And so I just started like hacking on it. Like, well, what if I added add-ons? What if I made it so that you could just like have a thing where it said, okay, I want Tanstack query, go and add that, and then solid the solid router came around, and solid the solid version of Tanstack start, because you got solid start, which is its own thing, and then you got Tanstack start, which is solid, which is a different thing. So I wanted to have a builder that would build for both, and you can start to see like more more complexity start going in. Instead, it becomes more like a refactoring thing, and it turned into a monorepo. Then we added I added a UI to it, so you can like literally do like npx create Tanstack app at latest, or to create Tanstack at latest, I think. And then dash UI, and you get like it pops up with a UI, and now you can just like select the add-ons, and you get to see the code live change and all that kind of stuff. And then you say, okay, make that for me. And now we're looking at actually building like an AI builder, like a kind of a bolt kind of thing, so you can just do that and vibe code with it. So it's been really exciting, but it's just been a fun ride to actually go and work with the team, hear feedback from folks, get PRs on stuff, and look at patterns like what Shad CN is trying to do with their stuff, and kind of bring those into it, deal with the complexity of everything, deal with testing everything. And it's been a wild ride, and it continues. We could ride this thing for a while. Like it's got kind of an old school vibe in comparison, like a Claude code. And I think we're going to try and move more towards that in terms of like the CLI UI.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's fun stuff to learn.
Yeah, and I think that'd be amazing. Like the fact that you have like this menu item select of all these integrations, or like, hey, like I want to do this, or it just makes such like the development experience like so smooth. And I think the fact that you're thinking about that from the start of how can we improve developer experience, like really adds this whole new element to allow people to build the things that they want with the least amount of friction, or at least getting started.
Yeah, and because I was at Nike and at Walmart before that, I know that those companies have like big UI toolkits. They got their own libraries, they've got their own API wrapper libraries, they've got their own starter kits and all that. And what I did was I made it so that you could basically go and take the Create Tanstack app library, the engine, and then just say, oh, well, don't use the React content, use my content. Here are my add-ons. Here's my libraries. Here's my start, like the position. It doesn't even need to be start. I actually demoed it using Quick, like, which we don't do it. I think we have like one library or whatever for Quick, but like, we don't do anything with Quick. So, but to just show that you could do this, you can use Quick for this. And then the library gives you things like, it gives you a UI for free. It gives you an MCP integration, a standard IO. You can just run it dash MCP. Now you can run it in your, Claude desktop or whatever. And you've got tools to go and create apps, and all of that stuff you get for free. So it's basically like a starter kit for starter kits. We haven't really documented that much yet, but I had in mind those big company uses when I refactored it to where it is, so that later on, when I get some free time to like actually document that part of it and like do some videos on it and things, I can be like, hey,
Yeah, no,
Fortune
that's
500,
awesome.
there you go.
That sounds so exciting. I think like the biggest thing for just like at the end of the day, what as a developer, it's like, yes, I love to code, but I am building something for a business owner or a solution to a problem. And at the end of the day, they don't care about the process. They just care about, did you solve my problem with the thing that you built for me? And from your approach, I think it's just understanding the customer and your work experience. It's like, we just need to create a type of framework or tooling that allows people to move quickly, to get stuff delivered quickly. And I think
Yeah.
that's the secret sauce like that I see, is that it's how can we help the developer to like ship faster, and how can we give them more options to either use our thing or add an add-on that will make it. So I'm really excited for that, and I seeing all the new things that you've all done, and then kind of talking to Tan about his vision of like server components, and like
Yeah.
and just seeing the flexibility of what I'm like cooking up. I'm like, you know what, I need to get back. And so now, like, especially after like talking to you, talking to Tanner, I'm like, my excitement is like high now that I have a bunch of projects that I did with Next, and I just want to migrate them to Tanstack Start, like, and then kind of have actually two projects and have that comparison and be able to say like, here's how Tanstack does it. Here's like, and I think like for folks, it's like I said before, it's like understand each tool does and its capabilities, and then pick the right tool for the job. Don't pick the tool, and then figure out what the job is, right? And so I'm excited to
And I
build
love
some of
like
these new projects.
there's these little touches. I was just working with this just recently. On a per route basis nowadays, you get a little like right at the top of your route file. There's a thing that basically says, create route, and you give it, the route name, and then a loader. So if you want some SSR data, you gotta have a loader that goes off and gets some data and put that, gets ready. If you're familiar with like old school Next.js, it would be the equivalent of like your get page props or get initial page props, right? Can't remember what exactly the term was, but basically that's what that is. But you can put a key on there, and the key is SSR, and you can say false, I don't want SSR. Or you can say SSR data, and it'll go off and get just the data, but it will not actually render out the page. It'll just go and get the data, and then the page itself is just still a spa. It just has a preloaded
Wow,
data ready to go.
nice.
Right?
That's
It's those
cool.
little touches. It's that touch of folks who've like been there, done that, and know that like for every route, there's often that time where it's like, yeah, this route is 100% spa. Like we don't want to deal with that. And then other frameworks, you've got to go and like, okay, now I got to make this use effect that basically like sets a Boolean, and I don't render if the Boolean's false, whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's a hack, right? It's a hack.
Yeah, it
But
is.
like, this is literally just a key that's like, oh, I want this page, I want SSR'd. This page I want SSR off completely, and this page I want SSR with the data. It's just like little touches.
What other like features are you like super excited that you're cooking up with Tanner?
Oh yeah, I mean, obviously the AI stuff that I'm doing, which is I'd love to run this by you and get your take on it. So the problem with making an AI service is inference. The inference costs money, right? Even as subsidized as it is, right? It's still money. So we and obviously Tanstack doesn't have the kind of money to run like a Bolt or a V0 or whatever. And we didn't want to do like the transit the money through us thing with the credits and all that. So our idea is bring your own key. It's, you have probably obviously an Anthropic key or an OpenAI key or both, right? And you basically just, we'll hold that in local storage for you. We'll only use, so it never leaves your machine except when you actually initiate like a chat session or something like that. But you get to decide, like, okay, I want to use this Claude key. Does that make sense?
I think that's fair, and I think that's
Okay.
kind of how I would prefer it. Me
Cool.
personally,
Great.
it's something kind of like what I've been doing. Like a lot of times, like for AI stuff that I do, like I have my own key and I prefer it, and it's just like, yeah. So to me, that's not like so weird to ask that of
Okay.
people, and I think it's
I think of developers, I think that's fine. Like that's our customer base.
that's like exactly,
Yeah. The only time we would need to have your key on our servers is for things like MCP, because like just the nature of like Claude calling, our MCP endpoint, and it's like you just don't have local storage there. So we need to hold it, but we would encrypt it and all that sort of stuff. And then you'd only, we would only use it for that. There's a reason sometimes to have like an AI behind an MCP tool.
Yeah, and one thing like I always wonder, like just like with all these big companies that we will go through, like OpenAI, Cloud, like there's this element of trust that they're not going to do anything weird with your data. But I know there's some people that will be like, hey, do you have an option to run a local LLM or something that we self-host? Is that something you've thought about, or
For us,
like
for our
let
stuff?
people just generally like for your stuff as well, but for people that, hey, we want to be in control of our data, we have our own local like model running on either like a
Yeah.
server somewhere or something like
Yeah.
think,
Olama. Yeah, totally.
yeah.
We are running too hot on this particular project on a timeline, but I imagine once we get it to where we want it, we'll probably refactor it out back into its own like library, and then it will have a way to run it locally off of CLI. And at that point, yeah, you could hit up, your Olama instance that has, I think there's a couple of really good coding, like 3B size networks that you can use locally. I do think that that's the future, though. I gotta say, like, I do think like training or tuning a coding model alone, that the coding model only knows this language and it only knows, just to reduce the size, right? Then you can tune it to like make forms or tune it to make routes or create, HTML or whatever. I think that that's going to be the way to go. I like that idea of running stuff locally. You could even run that in the browser potentially.
Yeah.
But think about, I mean, like the same, like we're using like Sonnet, the same model that you could use to write, I don't know, the next Star Wars movie is the same thing that you're using to write like,
And to me, that's
JavaScript code.
wild, because I'm like, that's too general.
Right?
It's
Exactly.
like,
Exactly.
because I'm
It's
assuming like you
everything.
could
It's
make
the everything
smaller,
model.
lighter models specific to
Right.
the one
Yeah.
task, and it's just going to be more performant, cheaper
It
to run. You
knows how
could
to
actually
cook
run
and
it
uses the
locally, you know?
brain surgery. I don't need
Exactly.
my model to know how to do brain surgery to also do my
Exactly. I
coding.
don't need a model that could write me a poem and my JavaScript at the same time. You
Right.
know, it's
No.
like, what are
Yeah.
we
Make a
doing? What are we
haiku out of
doing?
my code. I don't need
And
that.
that's kind of like one thing I see. Like, there's obviously like, and I think V0 as a service I like, because they're like, we're specific to Next.js and Chat.cn UI. And I think like if
Yeah. That helps
we
them.
were to do something as like AI, it would be specific to our domains. Just like you're saying for Tanstack, it's like we just want to do Tanstack things right, and like let's make like the best like service available for that. And I think to your point, yeah, it eventually it's this like smaller models that are specifically fine-tuned or at least referencing stuff that's particular to your domain.
Yeah. So that's what we're doing with the Tanstack stuff is, we'll have a recipe book for each one of the main, like, Tanstack for React, Tanstack for Solid, whatever comes next, because there will be more frameworks coming there. And then also, like, if you integrate in DB as an example, Tanstack DB, like it'll have a playbook or recipe book for DB. And then, like, if you're running Tanstack Start, React, and DB, it'll just merge those together and be like, okay, here's what we use, and here's how we code. And then you could go and add on your own stuff on top of that if you wanted to. But basically, that is our kind of solution to what V0 does. And V0 does exactly the same thing. I've seen the V0 system prompt, and it's like a full course on Next.js, kind of boom, there you
Really
go.
just put it in there. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't
Nice.
need to teach React, which is kind of nice. I guess Claude knows enough about React to know the basic,
Yeah.
hooks
Yeah.
and stuff.
Nice. I know we've been at it for a long time. I do want to be mindful of your time. So, like, for closing thoughts, anything else that you're excited about for upcoming months?
Alien Earth?
That's amazing show. My
Oh my
God.
God, so good,
I
dude.
can't. The only thing that I'm annoyed with, like, why can't you just release the whole season so I could binge watch it?
Oh,
Like,
I
just let me
know.
binge watch. Oh my God. My highlights, like, I'm like, my grandmother, she witnessed people going to the moon. For me, it's like we got AI, we got Alien Earth. That's like literally right there. Like, it's that level of accomplishment. It's like, good show. Well, yeah. Anyway, like, I just want to thank you so much for coming on. It was like amazing time. Really
Yeah,
great
it was really
chat.
fun.
I'm super excited to see everything that you're building. Awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks a lot.
me too. All right, check you later, man.